All right, welcome and Shabbat Shalom once again. I'm your brother Joshua here with goChrist, and we're going to be walking along this journey framework. And our next step in this framework is relational growth, the R in your journey, relational growth. And we're talking about strengthening not just our relationship with God, but with others as well. So we're going to explore it, unpack it. This is an idea of spiritual maturity, right? This is a journey that we're on. And as we iterate over and over and over on our journey, we're going to encounter the need for growth inside of our relationships. Again, not just with the Father himself, but with one another as well. And it is that fruit being produced that ultimately will tell the world that we are, in fact, his disciples. So we talk about the SPF framework through study of the scriptures, prayer and fasting. We've added fellowship, and we're going to talk about service as we move on in this journey. But today we're going to unpack the topics, give you some scriptures, some practical applications to move you along in your journey in the week ahead. Now, at the end of this live broadcast, we'll cut into our fellowship where we'll dissect this and share what the Father is dealing with us about in our walks this past week and in the week ahead, the actions, lessons that we can take to move us forward. I hope you're ready for this. We just wrapped up this wonderful observance of the Feast of Tabernacles. It's time to tabernacle with the Father. And once he comes on the inside of us and we've loved him, remember that one first great command, then we're going to begin to love one another as he loved us. And what a wonderful thing it is as he gathers his body back together in this restored relationship as we awaken, repent, and return to our Father. All right, first topic we're going to go into here, first bullet point, if you will, cultivating the relationship. Your very relationship with God is a requirement. It's needing to be cultivated just like a child. It's, in fact, the very reason we were told we must be born again is because there must be this childlike yearning for relation with our Heavenly Father, who has redeemed us. So we talk about prayer, we talk about worship. Now we're going to unpack some of this a little bit. I'll give you a couple examples here, but I'm sure you can already tell where this is going. See, this isn't just a one-time thing. This isn't a once-a-week thing. This isn't just show up here thing. This is a lifestyle, cultivating this relationship through prayer and worship. Let's look at James 4:8. James says it like this. Love that, brother James. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. So if you're double-minded, purify your hearts. We're in sin, wash our hands clean. See, there's something very deep inside of this. And this is why we get into the habits, the spiritual disciplines of study, prayer, and fasting. There's a drawing to the Father, and it's going to require that we worship him. In fact, the scripture talks about those that worship him will worship him in spirit and in truth. And that our cups, as we talked about last in the joyful awakening, the first step of the journey, it's going to bubble over with this joy. Everyone will know. You don't need to tell them. But if you can develop this habit day after day, day after day, day after day. Now, in the last 24 years of this race for me, it has been a very deep progression, but I also had a lot of darkness I was coming out of, a lot of years of lies and things that I had. So in order to draw to the Father, I had to tear down a lot of things that had built up and accumulated over the course of my journey up until that point. I'm sure the same is for you. You know, we all come into this race with a little bit of baggage, but as we continually draw near to the Father, he will draw near to us. And we will have this process of the washing of hands, if you will, this putting away of evil, washing. You ever hear wash your hands of that situation? Putting away the evil from us, and that allows us to draw even closer. So every time I would iterate over this, I would continue to press in with the idea of study and prayer, and ultimately in the last, about 14 years or so, fasting. These are critical elements for us to move forward and come truly near to the Father, to hear his voice, to break free of sin, to purify our hearts, to be singly focused as his disciples and as his witnesses here in these last days. Let's look at Psalm. 63. We'll look at verse 1 here. Psalm 63, 1. O God, you are my God. Early will I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. Now, if you've ever been to a desert place or been parched, you're pretty much looking for the water, right? Here we have the psalmist saying that he's seeking after this relationship with the Father. Early in the morning, he's parched, but he just wants that relationship. It's like the prodigal son, that thought on his journey home, once he made that decision, was all about, I want that relationship with my Father. I want to rather be a servant in his house than out here doing my own darn thing. And that's what we have all done. All of us as sheep have gone astray. We've gone about this way and that way and made decisions and made mistakes. And guess what, beloved, that's part of the journey. So if you hold any kind of condemnation about that, I'm going to get that released today. Join us in fellowship. Will you go over to goChrist.com/fellowship? We'll see you next week if you're not going to be here today. All right. What's he talking about here? The priority. He's putting even the thirst quenching waters that even the Father promised he would provide. He would make a way for the waters in the wilderness, in the dry land. But he didn't want the waters. He wants the relationship with God. So what's that like for you? How's your relationship with the Father? Where does it sit on the priority list of things? Now, we can say one thing, and I have said one thing for many, many years in my race, but once I turn around in hindsight and actually evaluate what the facts are and how I'm showing up and actually performing the thing I say I will do, I fell very, very short, come up lacking. And there's a danger inside of that, this idea of condemnation. But beloved, I would have you entertain the idea that this is, again, a falling forward journey. This isn't something that you immediately walk into perfection on. And even today, I'm striving in new directions. The Father's turning me in new ways as I continue to seek him and make him more and more of a priority. And guess what happens when I knock him off that priority list? The enemy is at the door, waiting. Yeah, that's the type of war we're into. If you haven't seen the spiritual warfare series, be sure to go over there. Let's talk about the second point here, building up godly relationships, right? Well, obviously, we need a relationship with the Father, and then we need relationships with one another. We talk about this inside of fellowship and community. And what we're endeavoring to do here, the Father's placed me to be as like a beacon, if you will, in this dark night of this world, shining light, speaking truth, and bringing the dead back to life. Like, come on, come home, come dry bones, come alive. This is purpose. And I've only been able to find this through the process of community and actual fellowship. Fellowship being a space where we come together in one accord in one place with no schism in the body. And guess what, beloved? That means no plastic face masks, no pretending, no lying, because you know as well as I do that we are liars, right? So let the word of God be true and every man a liar. If we can get past that and accept the fact that we're all liars, then we all of a sudden can come to a place of fellowship and begin to expose the truth of our lives, where we are actually walking, what we're actually struggling with, and begin to share with one another as the Spirit moves, bringing this community to a vibrant life, praying for one another, interceding for one another. And without that, beloved, relational growth is impossible. There must be some form of communal fellowship. Now, it can be wherever two or three are gathered in my name, absolutely. This doesn't need to be some big ordeal. In fact, I would posit to you that the bigger the ordeal, the less productive it was. And just think for a moment of the multiplying of the fishes and loaves and how Yeshua the Christ rebuked them all in a way, saying, you just came out here for the food. Their priority, like we talked about in the first point. And so here it is now, we're talking about others. How do we interact with them? How do we begin to build this up? Well, let's look in Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10. Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10. says two are better than one because they will have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, the one can help the other up. And see, we talk about this a lot inside of our fellowships and all the different experiences the Father's allowing us to facilitate. You can go and isolate yourself in the middle of your struggles, but beloved, the whole point of fellowship, the whole point of the community is to bring your struggle to the table. If you are falling down and you are by yourself, it doesn't work out well. And I can tell you this from a track record of fact and fruit. It does not work out well at all. And the Father never intended it to work out that way. As a matter of fact, he pulled the nation of Israel out. He pulled the family out. It's very rare you'll ever see one individual plucked out except for his prophets for a very specific mission. We're always designed to be inside a community, and hence the reason he's called it his body. So how do we do that? Well, I mean, you can do this locally. You can do this as we do fellowship virtually here until we begin to develop inside of different locales. But you have fellowship available to you locally. It may, see now, if you're going to go into this thing, again, think about where your heart is. Because I can tell you from history, just going through the motions, iteration after iteration after iteration, if you were going to a place to judge and set yourself on high, it will never work. That just means that the Father's not at the top priority yet, or isn't high enough yet. You're still up there. So you'll have to knock yourself down a bit. I know I did. And when I refused to, the Father saw to it that I got knocked down anyway. Because we need to learn the lesson. See it as a servant heart. And we'll get into this more next week when we talk about serving, but it's really important to understand that the community aspect is to see where you can give. So if you can bring yourself to that place, like you bring something to the table, you have valuable perspective. The Spirit of God moves in you, just as unique as you are made in his image, just as unique as your fingerprints. And so do I. So when we come together inside of fellowship, this means that we can all be complementary, and even the less desirable parts of the body, we're supposed to get the more honor. It's not the ones with all the, the pastor said a great message or this, that, and the other thing. And then everybody goes off idolizing the pastor and not ever getting into an actual fellowship, or, oh, the prophet, or, oh, the apostle, and go running after them and putting them up on pedestals. When again, it's the Father who's to be on the pedestal. And at his right hand, of course, is Yeshua the Christ. And then we are all on the same level. That allows us to enter into fellowship to serve one another with love. Again, I don't want to unpack that too much because that's going to be the next step of our journey. However, I do want to accentuate here. Two are better than one. Two are better than one. If it's just you and your spouse, fantastic, work on that. That could be the very centerpiece of all that the Father has placed you here to perform on this earth. So don't think about it as, oh, it's too small, it's too small. Numbers mean nothing to the Father. He can draw whomever, whenever he so desires. It's all about us preparing ourselves to enter into that position to be used to our maximum output. Let's look at Proverbs 27:17. And this doesn't have to be a formal thing either. So let me actually go back and point out the idea. Like, so you have friends, you have acquaintances, hopefully some friends that are also believers, right? It's a very difficult thing becoming yoked with non-believers or unbelievers, however you want to say that. But the fact of the matter is you probably have acquaintances or friends that you deal with. So you have the capacity now to develop those, right? You are growing in your relationship. The whole concept here is growth inside of our journey and understanding that where we're at today is not yet where the Father desires us to go if we will continue along our journey. Now, many have given up, and that's obviously not you because you're here. You're watching this. The Father's drawn you. He's got more purpose for you. He's got more for you to do. It's all about you connecting to him to hear his voice and then going and doing what he's told you to do. And the more that I begin to do that, the more the fruit bears itself out. All right, Proverbs 27:17. Iron's sharpening iron, just like one man's countenance sharpens another. When two men come together and collide, they have the ability to tighten things up. Give an example. When you have, I'll give you a military example. I'm not sure exactly why, but here we are. So there's a sniper out there. There's also a spotter with them. A sniper solo is very, very highly skilled, and the cost of failure is 100%. It's everything. But with that spotter there available, there's the ability to course correct rapidly and to get on target and so on and so forth. So it is with men. When we're sparring or anything that we're doing physically, or even anything we're doing academically, if we'll do it together and we'll be willing to collide and have the communications needed. I often think of Paul and Barabbas, for example. I don't, it doesn't tell us much in the scriptures, but when these men collided, they went off and did whatever they were called to do. You see, it doesn't matter how the collision happens. It's the fact that the Father's setting the table for the men to come together, as well as the women. Again, this is not just a sex thing here. To collide, to have the difficult conversations, to expose the things that are going on in their lives. And without these collisions, there's not really going to be any relational growth. There's not going to be a real sharpening of that iron. Now, what happens, of course, is we get into places of disagreement where, well, I know better than you, and you don't know what you're talking about, and things like that. Can you relate? And so we shut people out completely. There's no growth happening there. There's not even a relationship there. That's a fantasy. And that's what we've developed as a society, and inside of Christianity, unfortunately, that's what it's become. But deep down inside of your heart, that what the Father's intending for us to do is become his instruments, to become prepared brides awaiting our bridegroom. There is this time of this last leg of the journey, if you will, the last days, if you will, where all of this was going to come to a head, and we were going to need to perform, and we were going to need to be connected to one another in a way that's not superficial, that's real, that's filled with love, and not just words, but power. So that's what we're after here. So how can you do that? Well, the old adage about the same types of birds fly together, right? The eagles don't hang out with the chickens because they're off soaring with the eagles. Well, the same with us. If we're off running a race, then we're not standing idly by on the sidelines. We're off running the race. So what does that mean? Surround yourself with people that are actually running the race. And you can do that, especially inside of local fellowships and congregations. As we talked about before, there are table settings available to you if you will go and test it out. Now, I'm going to caution you, don't give up, okay? Don't give up as you're seeking this out. Start small and begin to just be faithful on what you declare. You're going to go here, you're going to do this, you're going to meet with them, then go do that. And just continue to try, and then seek the Father for the course correction inside of that. Where do you want me to grow here? What relationships do you want me to develop? Seek him out for it. He'll set the table every single time for you, beloved. It challenges you and I are not always well prepared to see what is exactly on that table before us in the presence of our enemies. That's one of the things we're endeavoring to uncover, even in this journey framework. All right, let's talk about the last topic here, walking in love. As I alluded to this before, this is a true mark of a disciple. This is how all the world is going to know that we are his disciples, because of the love that we have for one another. So let's look at that. John 13, 34 and 35. And John 13, 34 says this: "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." So if we can love one another, I heard it said before, well, how about we just get to start liking to like one another, get to start liking one another. There it is. Because oftentimes we don't really like each other, right? We tolerate each other more than anything else. But if we begin to like each other, then ultimately we can come to a place of loving each other. And we get into the next step of the framework, we'll dive really deep into how that practical application comes out. But for this right now, think about the intentions. When you're off showing love to one another, what is the intention behind what it is you're doing? Are you doing it to manipulate? Are you doing it to get your way? Are you doing it just because it makes you feel good? Are you doing it because you think such and such is watching, or it's going to get you favor? Or are you just purely doing it out of love? The Father gave us grace and forgave us while we were yet sinners. And when we talk about love, that's what we call unconditional. So inside of the body, even more so, not even having a schism or a wrinkle or a blot, all the more so, we should be walking in love. And all the world will know. And then you've got these opportunities to serve that'll come up on your table settings all the time. This could be your neighbors, could be your friends, could be inside of your local congregations. It could be inside of this fellowship. Look for that opportunity and then take it, even if it's just praying for people. Serving doesn't have to be something where you're face to face like that, but it does help. And all of it will show ultimately where you walk in love. Let's look at Colossians. This will be chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. Colossians 3:12 says, "Since God chose you to be the holy people that he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, oh boy, humility, gentleness, and get this, patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you." Now, I love the way this one's written out. I don't normally use the NLT, but that comes away really nice. It's crisp. Make an allowance for each other's faults. And that's one of the things we fall short in today. Even inside of our own relationships that we have been developing all of our lives, have we let unforgiveness or bitterness come in and ruin that? Have we let judgment or pride or hatred or envy come in and steal the growth from that relationship? The opportunity that's sitting before us is to overcome that and produce love. In my walk, I've had to do a lot of this, go through the process of unpacking the baggage. And one of the things that I struggled with deeply was making an allowance for someone else's faults. And I used to sit there, and particularly my own, because, hey, we all have them. And once you see a fault in yourself, it becomes this glaring thing, right? Until you sedate that away and other things come up, right? But as the Father breaks us free, understand we're all on that journey. We're all being delivered at whatever point and path we are on our journey. And there's an allowance that needs to be made for one another. We all fall short. I remember inside of our men's fellowships, we had some brothers come with some really nasty baggage. Well, guess what? Been there. And why am I so confident that's okay in that part of that journey? Well, because I was there and the Father delivered me and redeemed me. See, and it's that confidence that's going to develop all this gentleness, this humility, this kindness, this godliness. He's calling us to be a holy people, a royal priesthood in another place, a holy nation. Very peculiar, because most of the earth right now is filled with some sort of rage and hatred for something. Can you feel it? Whereas inside of the body, we have peace, we have joy, and we have love. All right. So think about that. You might want to take a little bit of an inventory. We've done another session, a segment on forgiveness and the power of it. You might want to go take a look at that, kind of backfill some more scriptures and solidify the idea that the growth is impossible without the forgiveness. And just like we want our Father to forgive us, we must also forgive others. And that's going to be one of the principal things inside of building this relationship. And it's going to develop that patience and that grace and that ultimately that loving character of the Father as it pours through us to those that he draws to us. So thank you for joining us here on the live broadcast portion of our weekly Sabbath fellowship. As we're going to jump in now, we're going to cut off of our live broadcast and jump into our fellowship. If you'd like to join us next week, be sure to head over to gochrist.com/fellowship. And we look forward to sharing with you lessons, revelations, action plans, and how the Father is dealing with you. Drop a comment, be sure to subscribe, and all the good stuff here. Until next week, we wish you a blessing. In fact, Shabbat Shalom from my home to yours. We'll see you.